Who repaired my armor? The Dragon Queen roared. A lone human mechanic replied. The chandeliers trembled when the Dragon Queen stormed into the grand hall, her armored boots striking the marble like thunder trapped in steel. The stained glass windows shivered with each step. Her wings, vast as storm sails, folded sharply behind her as she halted before the lone figure waiting in the center of the room. He was not a knight, not a sorcerer, not a noble, just a man in a grease-marked shirt, overalls still spattered with soot and dried blood. None of it his, thankfully. A wrench hung from his belt, absurdly small compared to the dragon-forged armor rising before him like a mountain sculpted into a woman. Her voice cracked the silence. Who repair my armor? The hall recoiled. Even the torches guttered back, as if afraid. But the man did not flinch. Elias had worked on starship hulls, plasma engines, derelict mining rigs in orbit over dying moons. Danger wasn't foreign to him. But nothing had prepared him for the presence of therein, Dragon Queen of the Seventh Pyre. She faced him fully now, molten light from the tall windows catching the sapphire scales along her cheekbones. Flames danced in her eyes, gold shot through with violet. Alive, ancient, evaluating him as if she could see through bone and memory. He swallowed once, then answered, I did. A dangerous stillness wrapped the hall. Her expression shifted, a flicker, subtle, like a crack in a glacier letting out its first breath. Surprise, maybe, or disbelief, or even offense that someone so small, so human, so ridiculously underarmored, dared to admit touching royal dragon steel. She stepped closer. Elias resisted the urge to step back. Barely. The temperature rose around him, a soft shimmer of heat crawling over his skin. Her aura always did that. The energy dragons carried in their veins didn't stay politely contained. Her gaze dropped to the armor he had reforged. The plates were newly seamless, no fractures left from the assassination attempt she'd endured. The intricate silver work along her breastplate glowed faintly, its power restored. Even the wing guards, shattered beyond recognition just 2 days prior, now arched smoothly behind her. She touched one edge of the cuirass, her clawed gauntlet gliding over a surface that felt almost alive. Impossible, she murmured. No human metalworker knows dragon bond crafting, and no dragonsmith would allow one to learn. He didn't respond. He watched her instead, how her brows narrowed, how her wings drew inward slightly, not in threat but unease. The queen didn't like not knowing things, or being vulnerable. Explain, she commanded, recovering her poise with a breath that ignited tiny sparks between her teeth. Elias lifted a hand, slowly, to avoid looking suicidal, and brushed the back of his knuckles over one thin silver seam near her shoulder. This part was cracked down the entire junction. His voice softened despite himself. You'd have bled heat until you collapsed mid-flight. It had to be rebuilt from the inside. Her eyes widened. Not many spoke to her like that. Matter of fact, unshaken, not scrambling to impress or flatter. He wasn't posturing, wasn't intimidated, just focused on her. You touched the heart plate, she said quietly. Yeah. He exhaled. I had to. That piece is fused to my lifeblood. Her tone held no anger now, only disbelief. A mistake there could have killed me. He met her gaze. I know, and you did it anyway. Someone had to. Silence expanded between them. Thick, uncertain, strangely intimate. A moment stretched where the hall ceased to exist, where the torches dimmed, where even the shadows held breath. Theron looked away first, not because she was dismissing him, because something in his answer had struck her too deeply. Humans, she murmured, wings tensing. You live so briefly, yet act as if you have nothing to lose. He allowed himself a small smile. Maybe that's why we manage impossible things. Her eyes snapped back to his sharp, searching. Your work? She hesitated, the word foreign on her tongue. It is flawless. No dragon in my kingdom could have saved this armor. And you, her voice dipped to something softer. You restored it as if it were your own. He shrugged lightly. Armor's an extension of the person who wears it. He paused. And you looked like you needed someone in your corner. That stopped her. Completely. Theron's breath caught. One fraction of a second, but he saw it. A queen used to solitude. A warrior accustomed to betrayal. A ruler who stood alone, even among her own kind. And here stood a human who had touched the one thing she allowed to shield her heart, and handled it with care. Before she could speak again, a tremor shook the floor. Echoes rippled through the pillars. Her wings snapped open instinctively, protective. A messenger burst through the great doors, breathless. Your Majesty, the traitor clans have moved. They march for the citadel. Theron's jaw tightened. Firelight flared in her throat. Elias spoke quietly. If they come for you again, that armor will hold. She turned toward him slowly, an unreadable expression forming. A mixture of warning, gratitude, and something far more dangerous, curiosity. You will remain by my side, she declared. Elias blinked. Is that an order? Her voice dipped, warm like embers. No, it is a request. Something shifted between them then, subtle but irrefutable. Not alliance, not duty, a thread, a beginning. Elias had expected to be dismissed after the messenger departed, sent back to the workshops, or at least kept far from whatever battlefield the Dragon Queen was about to stride into. Humans weren't exactly standard issue in dragon courts. The last human who'd been allowed inside the citadel had been a diplomat, and he lasted 14 minutes before insulting a noble's clutch lineage and getting escorted out by a very polite but very enormous guard. But Theron didn't walk away. She stood over him, wings half furled, armor humming softly as if testing its own restored strength. The faint silver seams pulsed with the rhythm of her breath. He felt the warmth radiating off her plates, never dangerous, but undeniably alive. Come, she told him, her tone low but steady. If the traitor clans threaten my rule, I need someone who understands what my enemies do not. He fell in a step beside her, boots tapping nervously against the polished stone. And what is that exactly? That my armor is no longer a weakness, she said. Her gaze flicked toward him with something like pride or trust. He couldn't quite place it, but it tugged at something under his ribs, something he'd thought long buried, a desire to matter, not just as a fixer of broken things, but as someone whose presence changed the course of events. They crossed the hall, her shadow stretching long across the floor, engulfing his. Yet he didn't feel dwarfed. He felt chosen. As they approached the strategy chamber, guards bowed deeply, first to the queen, then with unmistakable confusion to the mechanic trailing behind her. One guard, a towering drakekin, whispered too loudly, "Why is the soft skin here?" Theron's tail lashed once, a silent warning. Elias pretended not to hear. He'd been called worse. But Theron must have sensed the flicker of embarrassment in him, because she slowed her stride slightly, letting their steps fall and sink. You need not fear their words, she murmured, her voice pitched low enough that only he could hear. You accomplished what they believed impossible. Dragons respect results more than lineage. He huffed. Humans too, mostly. We just argue louder about it. A smile ghosted over her lips, unexpected and fleeting, but real. It softened the sharp lines of her face, made her fierce beauty shift into something warmer, more luminous. He felt heat rise in his chest for entirely non-dragon reasons. Inside the strategy chamber, maps glowed with runic markers. Advisors circled in tense silence. The air thickened with expectation as Theron stepped forward, Elias at her side. A silver-scaled general snarled, "Majesty, we must rally your kin immediately. These traitors dare advance because they sense vulnerability after the attack." Theron lifted her chin. There is no vulnerability. Her gaze drifted to Elias for the briefest heartbeat. Not anymore. That earned more stares. And questions. And more than a little suspicion. Elias kept his hands behind his back, trying to look useful instead of wildly out of place. The chamber buzzed with strategies, wing formations, fireline barriers, and aerial flanking maneuvers. None of it was his world. He fixed engines, not empires. But then Theron tapped the edge of her breastplate with a claw, right where Elias had reinforced the core channeling, and said, Elias, walk me through what you did. He froze. Now, yes, my generals must understand the significance of your work. The generals looked insulted. Dragons prided themselves on centuries of tradition, craftsmanship, and inherited skill. And now a human was being asked to explain engineering principles that contradicted nearly half their assumptions. He cleared his throat and stepped near the large map table. All right, so dragon armor isn't just metal. It's a heat resonance lattice. Think of it like a living circuit. The dragons blinked. Circuit, one echoed. Theron nodded, encouraging him silently. Elias inhaled. Your armor was built to channel your fire outward, but the fracture in the heart plate meant heat collapsed inward instead of dispersing. He met Theron's eyes. That's why you nearly collapsed the night of the assassination attempt. A visible ripple of emotion moved through the room. Fear, anger, shame. Theron's wings tightened. Yes. So, Elias continued, I rebuilt the internal lattice using a dual resonance alignment. It lets the armor absorb any incoming fire, even hostile fire, and redirect it rather than overload. One general stared open-mouthed. That should be impossible. Human tools can't shape dragon-forged alloys. Elias shrugged. I didn't shape them. I talked to them. Silence. Then Theron's lips curved again, slow, deliberate. He means he listened to what the metal required. He felt its rhythm. You should recognize the skill. Dragonsmiths of old did the same. Elias blinked at her. He hadn't known that. She didn't need to defend him, but she did. She chose to. The generals muttered, uncertain but impressed. At last, the silver-scaled general bowed his head slightly. If the queen trusts this human, then we must also. The meeting shifted, the tension thawing. Dragons began adjusting battle plans to incorporate Theron's revitalized capabilities. Confidence grew. When they were finally alone in the corridor again, Theron stopped him with a gentle touch to his arm. Gentle for a dragon, which meant it merely halted all movement in his body. You spoke boldly, she said. I spoke nervously, he corrected. Her expression softened. Boldly and with truth. A pause. You gave me more than armor, Elias. You restored something I had not felt in a long time. What's that? She looked at him, not as a queen to a subject, not as a dragon to a human, but as someone who'd stood alone for far too long. Hope. His breath caught. Her wings lowered, framing them in a half-circle of shimmering blue. Heat radiated between them, not scorching but warm, like standing close to a living hearth. You risked your life handling the heart plate, she murmured. Why? He hesitated, then answered honestly. Because I couldn't stand the idea of you being hurt. Theron blinked, stunned. Dragons rarely heard such words without flattery or manipulation attached. Elias had meant them. Everyone. A soft rumble rose from her chest. Not fury this time, but something closer to a purr threaded with confusion. Before she could speak, a distant horn blared, the citadel's outer alarm. Theron straightened, wings flaring. The traitor clans have reached the valley. She looked down at Elias. You stay with me, she said, voice low and certain. I would have you near. And inside her eyes, behind the fire and fury and regal armor, was the unmistakable spark of something new, something dangerous, something tender, something that frightened her far more than any army marching toward her gates. The citadel trembled again as the second horn sounded, 3 thunderous notes that rolled through the stone like an avalanche. Outside, the sky darkened, not with storm clouds, but with the beating wings of dragons mustering for war. Torchlight flickered across the walls as soldiers raced into formation, their scaled armor clattering like chimes caught in a gale. Theron moved with purpose, every step a surge of resolve. Elias followed close behind, trying not to stare at how her armor glowed brighter with each breath, alive, resonant, feeding from the restored channels he'd reforged. The runes pulsed in steady rhythm, matching her heartbeat, a living symphony of heat and purpose. But she felt something else pulsing too, Elias's presence. Close, steady, unafraid. Most beings flinched on her aura. Yet he walked beside her without hesitation. without awe, without fear, and the unfamiliar warmth that stirred her chest each time he matched her stride. She didn't know whether it unnerved her or anchored her. They reached the outer rampart overlooking the valley. From the balcony, Elias saw the enemy forces below, full-blooded dragons in jagged, obsidian armor, their banners crackling with hostile flame. They advanced in tight formation, wings tucked, throats glowing with pre-ignition fire. Soldiers of the traitor clan, known as the Scarmorn. "Damn," Elias whispered. "There's a lot of them." Theron stepped to the edge, wind tugging her hair and wings. Numbers do not decide a battle. She angled her head toward him. Resolve does. He swallowed, gaze drifting back to the valley. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't even sure he wanted to see a war from this close. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He didn't want to leave her. Theron extended a gauntlet hand. "Come." He froze. Aware. She lifted her wings, drawing them out to their full, breathtaking span. Into the air. "I will not face my enemies with you left behind. If you remain on the ground during the first volley, you will die." He stared at her hand, at the lethal grace of her claws, at the impossible offer. "You want me to fly with you?" he asked softly. "I want you safe," she answered without hesitation. Then, quieter, "I want you with me." The honesty of it hit him harder than the horns, harder than the roar of gathering dragons above. Elias placed his hand in hers. Theron's grip was careful, almost reverent. She pulled him close against her chest, enclosing him protectively in the cradle of her arms as her wings swept downward with thunderous force. Heat surged around them as the ground dropped away. Elias gasped, not from fear but awe. The citadel towers shrank beneath them, the valley unfurling like a painted tapestry. Wind tore at his hair, cold and sharp until Theron's aura enveloped him, a bubble of warmth that shielded him from the chill. She glanced down at him as they ascended. "If you feel unsteady, hold on." He looked up at her, his voice barely audible over the rush of air. "To what?" Her laugh, soft, low, stunned even herself. "To me." He slipped an arm around her neck, fingers brushing warm scales at the edge of her jaw. The contact made her breath catch mid-wing beat. Heat bloomed across her cheeks. No one touched the dragon queen so intimately. No one dared. Yet she didn't push him away. If anything, she held him closer. Below them, the traitor dragons roared in challenge, their lines shifting as they noticed the ascending silhouette of their queen. Fire flashed across the valley. The battle was seconds away. Elias's pulse thundered. "Theron, what exactly is the plan here?" "You improve my armor," she said, hovering with powerful sweeps of her wings. "Now watch what your craftsmanship enables." She angled her body, heat building in her chest, flames humming through the restored conduits of her armor. The plates glowed brighter, brighter, until the air around her vibrated with raw, focused power. Dragons on the ramparts gasped. One shouted, "Majesty, that is too much power. Your heart will overheat." But Theron smiled, fierce and triumphant. "No," she replied. "It will not." She released the fire. It wasn't a blast. It wasn't even a beam. It was a perfect arc of radiant heat, controlled, channeled, harmonized through every plate Elias had rebuilt. A sweeping tide of light roared downward, not to destroy, but to cut off the enemy's advance with molten precision. The valley floor glowed molten red in a semicircle before the Scarmorn forces, halting their march instantly. Elias stared, breath stolen. Theron, that wasn't possible before." "No," she said, voice warm with pride. "But you made it possible." The enemy forces reeled, losing formation. Confusion spread. Some hesitated. Others retreated a few steps instinctively. The battle had not even begun, yet the queen had already taken the sky and the advantage. Theron shifted her wings, preparing for the next maneuver. But then, without warning, an obsidian-plated dragon launched upward from the enemy line, streaking straight toward them with murderous speed. Elias's breath punched out. "Incoming!" Theron twisted midair, shielding him with her wings as the attacker's claws raked across her side. Sparks burst from her armor. The blow would have crippled her before Elias repaired it. Now it barely scratched her. But the attacker wasn't alone. 3 more dragons ascended behind him, spiraling upward in coordinated formation. They weren't aiming to kill her. They were aiming to tear Elias from her arms. Theron's eyes widened, not with fear for herself, but with something far sharper, far more primal. "No," she growled, voice vibrating with fire. "You will not touch him." Flame ignited across her wings in a sudden burst, startling Elias with its heat. She dove, twisted, countered, her movements a symphony of precision and fury. Elias clung tightly, heart racing. One attacker lunged again. Theron snarled and struck him with the back of her gauntlet, sending him spiraling downward. Another tried to flank her. She spun, wings slicing the air, bringing Elias even closer as she evaded a snapping maw. He felt her breath warm against his cheek, felt her chest rumble with the effort of protecting him. "Theron," he whispered, "you're going to get hurt." "No," she interrupted, breath unsteady. "Not while you're with me." Why does that matter so much?" She hesitated only a fraction of a second. In the middle of battle, with fire on her tongue and enemies all around. "Because," she said softly, "you touched my heart before you ever touched my armor." Elias froze. A dragon's confession. In the sky. In the heat of battle. But the moment was shattered as the lead attacker roared, spiraling back toward them in a final, desperate strike. Theron's wings snapped open. Her fire gathered. Her armor glowed hot as a newborn star. But just as she prepared to unleash another strike, a violent pulse of unstable energy shuddered through her armor. Elias felt it instantly. Something was wrong. Very wrong. He grabbed her armor plates, voice urgent. "Theron, stop. Something's overloading. There's a resonance spike." And the world exploded in white-hot light. The explosion wasn't fire. It was soundless, blinding resonance. The air rippled outward in a sphere of white-blue light, like a bell struck in the sky. Theron's wings jerked violently, their membranes flaring with uncontrolled heat. Elias felt the shock shudder through her armor, rattling his teeth, vibrating deep in his bones. For a terrifying moment, they dropped. Freefall. The wind tore past his ears in a scream. Elias's stomach lurched, gravity pulling him away from her arms, away from the warmth that had shielded him. Her claws tightened around him just in time, but he could feel her grip shaking. "Theron," he yelled over the wind. "Your resonance lattice, it's destabilizing." She gasped, a harsh drag of breath, struggling to force her wings open. I can't control the surge." Her armor glowed too brightly now, seems burning white-hot rather than silver. The dual resonance system he'd installed was robust, stronger than anything she'd worn before, but he hadn't accounted for this level of energy output. Her instincts, her power, her fury, they were overwhelming the balance. Her flight faltered again. Elias wrapped both arms around her neck, pulling himself close so she wouldn't have to waste strength keeping hold. "Listen to me. You have to slow your fire. Let it diffuse." "I cannot," she rasped. "If I release it now, it will strike the entire citadel." Below them, the world rushed closer, a blur of towers, battlements, startled dragons watching their queens spiraling downward in a crown of dangerous light. The enemy dragons pursued, emboldened by her fall. Elias made a decision he didn't fully think through. "Theron, look at me." She forced her eyes open. Golden violet flames churned inside them, too bright, too wild. Her power wanted to burst free. She fought it with every fiber of her being. He pressed his forehead against the cool metal at her collar, voice steady despite the fall. "You trusted me once already. Trust me again." Her breath caught. "Elias, if I lose control." "You won't," he whispered. "I'm right here." For a fraction of a heartbeat, everything still between them. And then, with a roar of effort, she snapped her wings open wide, catching a turbulent pocket of air. Their fall slowed, but not enough. They crashed onto a lower parapet in a shower of sparks and shattered stone. Theron rolled instinctively to shield him, taking the full impact herself. He hit the ground hard, but alive. Theron landed on one knee, armor heaving with unstable heat. She hissed, claws digging into the stone. "Elias, get back, my fire." He crawled toward her instead. "No," he said, gripping the overheated plates on her shoulder. "I'm not leaving you. You must." Her voice trembled, not from weakness, but fear. "If I explode, you'll be—" He leaned closer, raising his voice over the rising hum of her armor. "Theron, look at me." Her head jerked toward him, eyes burning like twin suns. He cupped the side of her face, careful of the scales, but firm. His hand trembled from the heat, but he didn't move it. "Focus on me," he said softly, "not the fire." Her breath shuddered. "Elias, you said I touched your heart before I touched your armor." His voice lowered, earnest, unguarded. "So let me touch it again. Let me help you steady it." A single tear of molten gold slid from the corner of her eye, draconic emotion manifest in light. She closed her eyes, and for the first time since the battle began, she let someone else in. Elias placed both hands on the heart plate, ignoring the burning heat. He felt the resonance vibrating wildly beneath it, like two mismatched rhythms trying to tear each other apart. "I need you to breathe with me," he said. Her voice was barely audible. Humans breathe too fast. "Then match mine," he said, heart pounding. "We'll meet in the middle." She inhaled, ragged, shaky. He inhaled with her. Her exhale was a tremor of heat. He let out his breath slowly, steady, grounded. The lattice responded. The screaming resonance softened just a little. He kept going. "Again," he whispered. She followed. The hum decreased further, the wild pulses sinking slowly toward a calmer rhythm. Her fire dimmed from white to gold, her armor shifting back toward controlled glow rather than overload. Elias leaned in her chest, forehead pressed to the heart plate. "That's it. You're doing it." Her voice trembled. "No, we are." The moment stretched, warm and close, their breaths falling into perfect alignment. Her massive form lowered slightly as the tension unwound from her muscles. Her wings drooped, no longer rigid with strain. Then, without warning, one of the enemy dragons landed on the parapet behind them with a thunderous crash. Theron's eyes snapped open, rage and protectiveness blazing anew. "Elias," she growled. But this time, she wasn't trembling. Her fire wasn't unstable. Her armor hummed with perfect balance, calm, focused, deadly. Elias could almost feel her energy returning, like the first deep breath after near drowning. The enemy dragon lunged. Theron's tail whipped around with precise force, slamming the attacker back into the wall. Her fire ignited, brilliant and controlled, racing down her arm as she slammed her gauntlet into the stone. A shockwave of heat rippled outward, knocking the attacker unconscious. Elias stared in awe. "Theron, you did it." She turned back to him, lowering her head until their foreheads almost touched, scale to skin, warmth to warmth. "No," she whispered. "You did." He swallowed, suddenly aware of how close she was, how intensely she looked at him, how the glow of her armor softened when he was near. Her voice dropped to a low, intimate murmur. "You held my heart when no one else could. You steadied a dragon's fire." A beat. "Do you understand what that means?" He blinked slowly. "I think so." She exhaled, a hot breath fanning across his cheek. But before she could say more, another horn sounded, this one sharp, urgent, desperate. A new wave of enemy dragons burst over the citadel walls. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Theron rose to her full height, wings spreading wide, fire simmering beneath her scales, not wild, not unstable. Controlled, focused, inspired. She extended a clawed hand to Elias. "Will you fight beside me?" He placed his hand in hers. "Always." And as the sky burned with the wings of war, the Dragon Queen and the lone human mechanic stepped into the storm together, bound not by armor or duty, but by something far deeper, something they had both begun to fear, and both begun to want. The sky was a storm of wings. Dragons clashed above the citadel, fire streaking across the air in violent arcs. The ramparts shuddered beneath the force of impacts, and the night glowed like a fractured sun. Heat, smoke, steel, and roars merging into a single trembling heartbeat of chaos. Theron stepped in front of Elias. Wings curved protectively around him as the first wave descended. Her fire pulsed through her armor, controlled and precise, stabilized by trust, not force. "Stay close," she ordered, voice warm with strength. He stood at her side, chest pounding. He wasn't a warrior, but he wasn't helpless either. Tools rattled in the pockets of his overalls. Wrenches, arc clamps, small gadgets no dragon had bothered to learn the purpose of. He pulled out a compact pulse driver, meant for machinery, not dragons. But war never respected intended use. Theron inhaled sharply and released a tight, cutting beam of flame. It sliced through an incoming attacker's wing, forcing him into the wall. Another dove for her blind side. Elias reacted before she could. He slammed the pulse driver into the stone floor. A shockwave burst outward from the device, stunning the second attacker mid-lunge. Theron spun, using the opening to knock the dragon clean over the parapet. She glanced at Elias, astonished. "That device isn't meant for combat." Elias shrugged breathlessly. "Neither am I." A sound came from her, half growl, half laugh, threaded with something softer, something dangerously close to affection. But the battle didn't pause for emotions. The largest enemy dragon descended then. Their leader, armored in obsidian plates carved like jagged mountain ridges. His wings were massive, his roar shaking loose stones from the battlements. "Theron," he bellowed, "your reign ends tonight." Theron stepped forward, fire curling at the edges of her mouth. "You will regret threatening what is mine." Elias blinked. "What is?" But he didn't have time to finish the thought. The enemy leader lunged. Theron launched upward, colliding with him midair. Their clash cracked the sky, sparks raining down as their armored bodies collided. Elias shielded his face from the debris, watching helplessly as the two dragons spiraled upward in a deadly dance. Theron fought with fierce precision, but the leader was massive, stronger than the others, his armor absorbing most of her flame. They slammed into a tower, shattering the outer balcony. Theron used the momentum to claw at the seams of his armor, but he countered with a brutal tail swipe. She crashed hard. Elias didn't think. He ran, across the fractured parapet, over shattered stone and flickering embers, toward the dragon who had just knocked Theron to her knees. He didn't have a plan. He had a wrench and adrenaline and a heart that refused to let her fall alone. The enemy leader looked down at him and sneered. Human, insignificant, but Elias wasn't afraid. He yelled back, voice raw, "Hey, over here, you overgrown coal pile." The dragon blinked, shocked that a human dared. Elias swung the wrench, not at the dragon, but at one specific seam in the enemy's armor, a vibration node identical to the resonance points he'd rebuilt on Theron's. Armor lived on rhythm. Break the rhythm, and you break the armor. The wrench connected with a sharp metallic crack. The enemy leader roared in pain as his armor flickered, resonance destabilizing. Theron surged upward instantly, sensing the opening. She slammed into him with renewed strength, claws gripping the broken node. Fire burst through the breach, overwhelming his inner channels. The obsidian armor shattered. With a scream, the enemy leader fell from the sky, crashing into the valley below. The battlefield stilled. Dragons on both sides stared, stunned. Their leader, defeated not by raw power, but by a human with a wrench and a dragon queen who trusted him. The remaining traitor dragons hesitated, then retreated, wings folding in surrender as they backed away from the citadel. Elias exhaled shakily, knees buckling. Theron landed before him, wings folding tight. She was bruised, breathing hard, but alive, and her fire glowed with steady, centered warmth. She reached for him, claws gentle as they brushed his cheek. "You struck an apex warrior," she murmured, with a wrench. He tried to grin, but exhaustion made it lopsided. Did it work? Her breath left her in a shaky exhale. "Elias, you saved me." "You saved me first," he said softly. She lowered her forehead to his, scale to skin, heat to heartbeat. I cannot remember the last time anyone fought for me, she whispered. And never has anyone fought by my side as you have. He swallowed, overwhelmed by the closeness, the intensity shimmering in her eyes. Therein, her voice dropped to a low, trembling warmth. Tell me truthfully, why did you run toward danger for me? He met her gaze, unguarded. Because I care about you. More than I expected. More than I should. She inhaled sharply. Then, with exquisite gentleness, she cupped his face between her claws, bending close until her breath warmed his lips. Not a kiss, but a promise. Humans, she murmured, voice tender. Full of fire where none is expected. He laughed weakly. Coming from a dragon, that's a compliment. She breathed out a soft laugh, her forehead touching his again as she whispered. You repaired more than my armor, Elias. You repair my heart. His chest tightened, warmth blooming beneath his ribs. And you gave me a place I never thought I'd find. Her wings curved around them, a cocoon of heat and shimmering scales. The world outside softened. No war cries, no enemy roars, only the quiet aftermath of survival and the fragile new bond in the center of the storm. Elias leaned into her, resting a hand on the warm metal over her heart. So what happens now? Theron smiled. A slow, luminous smile that transformed her fierce beauty into something breathtakingly gentle. Now, she said, you remain by my side. Not as a subject, not as a mechanic. Her claws trailed lightly along his jaw. But as someone I choose. The citadel lights flickered, the wind stilled, and for one suspended moment in the aftermath of battle, the Dragon Queen and the lone human mechanic stood together. Not as ruler and subject, not as dragon and human, but as two hearts unexpectedly intertwined. A beginning forged in fire, a future written in trust, and a bond that no armor could ever contain.